Okay, so we have another game to analyze from Neil Bruce, BC, on Twitter as part of the chess community, chess bunks, kind of a thing that was started, and just like a lot of good conversations that happen on Twitter about chess puzzles, ideas, chess improvement, and I joined this group, just kind of joining the discussions, and it's been really useful for me as well. So this is actually my second time analyzing a game by Neil Bruce. My very first game of the series was Neil's game. So we're kind of coming full circle. I think this is my sixth person. I think it's the sixth person I'm analyzing their game. So let's go ahead and look at it. And the thing is that he also provided analysis himself, which is really helpful. Let's make sure we're live and good to go. Okay, so we have this on Chess. So we have this open source software, and yeah, we're good to go. Okay, so he begins with e4, e5. He's playing the black side against the Ruy Lopez. So knight f3 attacks the pawn, and he defends it with knight c6, which is considered the best move other than d6. This is more active. So after bishop b5, now we're in the Ruy Lopez, and Neil chooses to play a6, which is the main continuation. Attack the bishop, and the bishop drops back, and he attacks the pawn. So all this is main line. I mean, you could look into the Ruy Lopez if you want and choose which variation you'd like to play. But I'm just gonna go through this because he basically in his notes at the beginning, Neil was just saying, oh, first of all, he said he's playing against a 2088, so an expert, solid expert, and he's a 1706, so he's like we'd call that a class B player. Once he hits 1800, he'll be a class A player, which I'm sure he'll do very quickly. He's been studying a lot and he's playing very strong. So so far from what I see, it looks like he was playing well. And notice the backstory to this game. So it was over the board, OTB, game 60 and 5, so 60 minutes with a 5-second increment. So you gained 5 seconds each time you hit the clock at the Metro West Chess Club in Natick, if I'm pronouncing that right, Natick, Maryland, Massachusetts, near Boston. So this is the open section of the monthly tournament, and he's played this gentleman several times. Although he said before the game, he said, "I have your number." So interesting gentleman anyway. Maybe he's just joking. I don't know, but it's a little cocky. So maybe he deserved what was coming to him. So we have Neil's analysis just about every move. So at the beginning, as I was saying, he just kind of mentions, we're following book. And he says he doesn't know the martial attack, so he just played the main line with castling. After bishop e7, b5. So he defends this first. Now notice when you play d6, you're securing the e5 pawn. Now it may seem trivial, but because it's already defended by the knight. But the thing is, you might be able to play knight a5 and secure that bishop. Do you think white wants to give up that bishop? Probably not. That's why white will play c3. So if you go knight a5 right away, the bishop will simply tuck away on c2, and he'll preserve his bishop pair. And that bishop, even on c2, I think we saw actually in Neil's first game, which funny enough was also a Ruy Lopez from the white side, we saw that bishop's influence on that diagonal. So it may open up later on. So d6, intending possibly knight a5, c3. Okay, so he castles, h3. And this is interesting. It's happened in Neil's game also. And since then, I've noticed the Fischer game where Fischer did c3 and then h3. So I was saying you don't need to play h3. I think Neil played it first. And I was like, just play c3. But you could do both. It does turn out to be fine. So knight goes to a5, attacking the bishop. And says, hey, I want to imbalance things. And I'll comment on something that you mentioned, Bruce, about, Neil Bruce, that you mentioned about, I was thinking, especially after Bruce wheeled that with that roast thing, I was thinking, so yeah, it was definitely, that word was on my mind, I guess. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. So, but yeah, after this move, attacking the bishop. So you mentioned that your opponent said he likes to imbalance things. You said, why did he play a certain move in the game to imbalance things? You said, well, that approach might come back and bite him essentially. Well, the point of doing that is it's a double-edged sword, but you're trying to play for winning chances. Whereas the last game I analyzed, I felt like maybe I was being a little harsh on him, but I felt like Matt was maybe being a little bit too what's the word, acquiescent, I guess. just playing for symmetry, almost too respectful of his opponent. Respect your opponent, but I think by playing for imbalances, you can try to create an advantage. Now it's a question of how risky you want to get. So, but just creating an imbalance is not a huge risk necessarily. There is some risk entailed, but I think it's good to create imbalances because then you do get something to work with. Now, in the game, you'll see his opponent plays a very risky move, and Neil does end up punishing it. Okay, so after knight a5, the bishop tucks back to c2, and the pawn goes to c5. And this is all mainline stuff. So it allows d4, and now the queen just tucks away on c7, gets off that d file, and everything is secured. So there is one thing structurally, there's one weakness in particular, maybe two, but in particular there's one weakness that white is taking on. What's that? The d5 square. By playing c5, I always get into pawn structure. As I said, pawns are the soul of chess, according to, as I have on my, as I have on there, according to, I'm like brain dead right now. Pawns are the soul of chess. Who said that? Of course I should know who said that. You could think of it. I'm like blanking out right now. I did a camp today all day long, so I'm like a little bit brain dead. But after d4, hopefully I have enough brain power to analyze this game in depth, though. So after queen c7, I think it'll come to me. So yeah, this pawn right here is square. Given that both pawns have moved, it's become weakened. And also d6, theoretically d6 is also weak because the pawn has moved. But of course we have a bishop and a queen guarding it, so will it be able to be attacked? Probably not. Okay, so after knight b d2, that's natural. Now he decides to take once to open up some lines, and then you immediately create that target on d4. So even though you may have weakened d5 a little bit, at least you have a target on d4 that you can attack twice. And as Neil mentioned in his notes, if the knight goes to f1, then you can take it. I think you mentioned you could just take on d4 because of the bishop on c2. So yeah, you might get some doubled pawns. Like for example, if he goes knight f1, you go takes, takes, and takes. You get these doubled pawns, but you say, hey, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about this pawn on d4? Maybe you can try and maneuver your, maybe get this bishop to safety, or maneuver your knight to take it later, but still, you have to deal with it. And yeah, they just keep on developing naturally in the meantime. The bishop might go to b7, rook might go here, and at some point you might even try and just bust it open with g5. Yeah, so Neil mentioned that you don't really want to go knight f1 because of that, which seems to be the case. So he does d5, essentially getting rid of the tension, which is probably what Neil wanted. He doesn't mind it, giving up the tension in the center. And now let's see if we're the first to strike on the c file to put some pressure there. Well, after knight b4, you're already hitting the bishop. Now the bishop goes back. Interestingly, in Neil's first game, he decided to go bishop b3, and I thought, well, maybe he can go bishop b1. His opponent decided to do this. It's a different position, but similar structure. Now a5, this is all book. Now one of the things behind a5 that you can do is to secure the c5 square. It's going to be very hard for white to get b4 in now, given that you got more dark square control with a5. So that's actually, I found another game where somebody beat Michael Adams. Who was it? It was I don't know who it is. It's Adgenstein. I haven't heard of him before, but he's like a pretty strong grandmaster, 2590, and he beat Michael Adams as black in this line. And instead of doing after knight f1, instead of doing rook e8, and now there's some commentary by Neil here. He said knight e8. This was move. That was move 16, and he says, where are we? This was my first think because all my previous moves are known to me. I took about 2 minutes and played rook e8, looking to get my bishop to g7. I also considered bishop d7, but this takes away the protection of the bishop on e7. So, okay, so in this position, I considered bishop d7. So instead of here, this move. But he didn't like the notion that the bishop's undefended because the communication is broken between the bishop and the queen. Is that relevant? I mean, anytime you have a loose piece, it's relevant. But will it actually come under attack? Well, I guess I can see that, because if you're anticipating white following through with his standard plan of knight e3 or g3, and then going to f5, and you'll see numerous Fischer games where he does that to great effect. And then of course the knight will hit the bishop. So I can see that. So rook e8. At first I was thinking, well, why'd you do that move? Because I remember there was one move. It really came down to one move. I mean, or maybe it was like a period of time over a series, but it was mainly one move in particular where it just seemed like you were playing without a plan, as you discussed. You acknowledged that on game one. And so I was thinking, okay, are you doing that anytime in this game? And this was the one move where I thought, well, it's a typical move, yeah, to go rook e8, but still, it doesn't seem to serve a direct purpose right now. But I get it. Yeah, you might want bishop f8, and then often the bishop will actually reroute after g6, covering f5, stopping that pesky knight from getting in, and then you go to g7. Okay, yeah, you're biting on granite, but so you're biting on granite here too. So you're kind of just going to have to deal with it for a little bit and have a temporarily bad bishop that, you know, kind of like in the King's Indian, but hopefully he'll cover your king and he can, you know, get out later. But most importantly, you can counterattack with f5 at some point, because notice that white's pawns are aiming this way, your pawn chain's aiming this way. So that might be a real possibility of f5, g6 and f5. Also, you can play on the c file, of course, because that's the open line. You ask yourself, what are the imbalances? Where is the activity, you know, based on the pawn structure? So since we've already decided to trade a pawn, clearly this is the most relevant thing right now. It's got to be the c file. Look at your control over c5. Again, as I mentioned, your pawn on a5, making it really hard for him to play b4, which means you can get your knight to c5, and that's what happened in this game. So in the Adams game against Agdenstein, so instead of rook e8, Agdenstein won convincingly. I mean, this was an awesome game. 91, which I think was around the height of Michael Adams. So he wasn't a patzer. I mean, he was a 26-15, as we can see. Or maybe you can see, maybe not. Maybe it's blocked. But it says 26-15, and Agdenstein's 25-90. So look at how this guy outplays Adams. I think it's just really instructive. I'll quickly flip through it so you get an idea. Instead of rook e8, knight a6. Now you say, okay, my knight is kind of, you know, overstayed his welcome on b4. What's he really doing? He's chased the bishop back. Yeah, you're taking that square away from him, but you're going to get kicked at some point anyway. It's pretty typical to play a3. So he says, why not go to a6 and reroute to c5? Now you're hitting d3 and, of course, the e4 pawn. And if he ever plays a3, well, that's even better. Maybe wait for him to play a3 because you weaken this. You can play a4 and anchor in on b3 as well. But look what he does. This is interesting. So just so you have like an alternative plan in terms of not just, it's not just about knowing the opening moves, because you mentioned that, you know, you had to memorize like whatever it was, 14 moves, and then you're off the book, out of the book. But it's about knowing what are the plans arising from this structure. So I think this is a great example. He goes 96, knight back to h2. What's he trying to do? Maybe he wants to go to g4. Maybe he wants to crack it open with f4. He has options now. Maybe, actually, I think he played g4, which, funny enough, in the game, your opponent did as well. Yeah, so now after knight c5, he goes g4. And this is really interesting. So one first thing that you might find useful is this maneuver. Second thing you might find useful is, rather than going h5, which was your response in the game, he actually plays in a really just a tight move, h6, just keeping it tight, grabbing those dark squares. Nice grip on the dark squares. Look at that. So you obviously have the central dark squares, which gives you access to these squares. You got this here. You're controlling like pretty much every dark square on your side of the board, and going into one square into your opponent's territory as well. So you can just see this domination on the dark squares, particularly given that your opponent has weakened the dark squares himself on all those, particularly here. And well, for example, like if you played f3, that would be even worse. Now that starts to kind of bleed into g3 and e3 and f2. So we could just imagine, and then you might even reroute your bishop. Now you could start to see the power on those dark squares for you. So watch what he does here. Keep this in mind. I mean, this is kind of rare. As you said, what's he doing? I mean, it does happen sometimes. You'll see it in the Italian game and stuff. Sometimes they'll play g4 and they'll tuck a knight behind it, and you're like, okay, well, you have some protection. You don't just play g4 out, you know, and just leave your king out, you know, out in the open. But you have some pieces behind still. Ideally, you'd want like a bishop there as well. But okay, let's see. This is Michael Adams. He's not an awful player, obviously. So h6. Now he goes to g3. Now he wants this. He wants knight f5. That's typical. Who knows? Maybe knight h5. I think knight f5 would be the move. You might go king h1 and even rook g1 to anticipate the opening of the g file if it gets captured. And again, as you mentioned, it hits the bishop. But most importantly, hitting the focal point of g7 and this whole complex, really. Maybe you sack on h6 at some point, trying to attack. Maybe you get a bayonet attack. Call it a bayonet if you get, it's either g4, g5, or b4, b5 if you can crack it open. In particular here with the h6 pawn and knight here, this will act, it's almost like a fork. It's hitting both h6 and f6, so pry open a line. So you have to keep an eye out for that. But it didn't matter. He didn't really, he's inviting that. Well, let's see, what would happen if he had gone g5? I think you just take it. You just take it, let the bishop take, and then you can tuck your knight similar to how he did in the game. And now you're trying to trade bishops and get control of the dark squares. And if he tucks his bishop away, so for example, I'll just play it out. So let's say you take it. And it looks a little risky. You're kind of opening up the some squares. But look at white. All he's got is a pawn on h3 covering his king. It's very open. So after knight here, you're trying to get in on those dark squares. So I wouldn't advise trading bishops for white because first of all, this bishop's way better than the bishop on e7 at the moment. Second of all, you want it for protection. So let's say you go like bishop e3. Yeah, now black has a more solid position around his king. White's more open. Only has one pawn. This is just wide open for any checks, infiltration on these squares, things like that. Oh, not to mention h3 is hanging. Yeah, so yeah, oh, my bad. So immediately after g5 takes. You don't even need knight h7. You just take a pawn. So it's not just positionally bad. It's refuted tactically. Yeah, just drop. I'm sure Bruce would have seen that. Neil would have seen that in like 5 seconds because he does so many tactics. He creates his own. If you follow him on Twitter, he creates his own tactic cards. Actually, he does like thousands of them. So that's impressive. Yeah, I should have seen that. As I said, I'm a little tired, but no excuse. But yeah. So I think after takes, bishop takes h3. Knight h7 wouldn't be terrible, positionally speaking, and you might still get h3. It's still an issue. But yeah, white's pretty much lost here. King is open. He's a pawn down. Okay, so he goes knight g3 first. Knight h7. So again, we're getting that grip on the dark squares. You can't push h4. You can try f4, but then after takes, you get access to the e5 square for black, and just opens things up to get to the white king. So I don't think that's advisable either. I got that from Reshevsky. Reshevsky's got this book. He kept on using the word advisable on if you read Reshevsky's book on positional chess, which is basically just him crushing the king's Indian. So knight f3, knight g5. Okay. So you can see he's hitting at h3. That's still a weakness even without being pushed and exposing it to the bishop. It's still a weakness from the knight. And he says, go ahead, please take it. And I think he does at some point. He says, go ahead and take it, because if you take it with anything, I take back, possibly, maybe even with the bishop, actually. If you take with the pawn, you get the grip. But if you take with the bishop, you still can't play h4 or f4. Most importantly, though, you're trading off your one bad bishop, and then you'll be playing your good bishop against the bad bishop, since that guy's just biting on granite, as we'd say. Yeah, so this is looking great. And if he does take, we'll see this in the game itself. But I think this is really instructive the way that he played. So knight goes back, comes into g5. So king has to literally cover h3 himself. So he trades down, and then he gets his bishop in anyway. Now he trades off his bad piece, and black or white obliges. He takes it, and now black really gets that grip. And he doesn't. Who cares about the double pawn? That's beneficial for us actually, because maybe you can go like g6, king g7, rook h8, and attack that way. So after rook h1, queen d8. So what's he doing? It looks to me like he's not allowing h4 since he's controlling through this pawn. So you can't even try h4. And I don't know, does he want queen f6? He might try to trade queens. Yeah, that's what he did in this game. After g6, I think. So he goes g6, covers everything. So now the nice thing about double pawns is you cover a lot of squares, in addition to the open line that it grants you. So knight f1, king g7. Yeah, he just wants the end game now, and you'll see it's beautiful. Look at how beautifully this guy that I haven't heard of. He's probably well, back in the 80s or 90s, so he's probably pretty big. He was like a 2600 player, Agdenstein. So after king takes f6, ooh, a4. Well, that just weakens his position. You see, that looks very anti-positional. Well, first of all, black has that grip on the dark squares across the board, literally. And now a4 just reinforces the grip because you could have played a3 and held b4. Now you played a4, and he just opens the lines up. And look at that. Now you've got bishop a6 coming anytime you want. You get rook b8, so that's already a target on b2. Okay, maybe he wanted a5 to attack, but now after b3 is still a target potentially. Look at that, beautiful. Rook b4 anchoring. I don't think he cares about a5. He wants his piece activity. So with the rook on b4, you're hitting this. We're just literally threatening to destroy the center, which is one of the nice things about closed positions, because if you can break that position open, everything might just fall apart, like it might just collapse like dominoes. Oh, it's interesting. Did you hear about? I think it was in Germany where they tried to set the world record for dominoes. Was it like 500,000? But a fly apparently destroyed the whole thing. So after bishop a6, rook h2 c1. Still, he's not going anywhere. Now remember the idea that he did earlier. He did this knight a6 to c5 thing, and he ensured that the knight would just stay there with the grip on the dark squares, and you can't do anything to the knight. He's just an attacking piece. He's working with the bishop to hit d3. He can hop in there anytime he wants. He's hitting this, he's hitting this. He's just an awesome piece. Plus, he's clogging up the c file. So I would say this is a decisive advantage for black. We just need to crack it open somehow now. Got to wait for that tactic to come. I'm sure Neil will find the tactic when it comes. So after here, doubles up, just puts more pressure on b3. And then he comes to d4, hits the knight. Look at this. Infiltration. So interesting. You'd kind of expect like the knight to come in or something, but he comes in with the rook because he can literally bring both rooks in, and he can just kind of operate with impunity and do whatever he wants. Like you know who I'm talking about. After rook a3, rook goes to b4, and now we have bishop to bishop c6. So that you can just see the obvious difference between the two bishops. This bishop's way more powerful. Yeah, he wants this pawn, but so what? Look at all the activity black has. This pressure. There's going to be some tactics here. Is it already time? He doubles up on the knight. He wants to remove that knight. I mean, he could have gotten away with taking, but he doesn't want to cash in that quickly. It'll get messy because then this is going to fall too. So first he goes for the knight, hits that, lets this knight remain as the protector of a6. This is beautiful. Look at the buildup. Just complete infiltration and domination of the position. Now he doubles it defensively, laterally. Now look at that. He infiltrates further. Now he's getting ready to, instead of you say 2 hogs on the 7th, he's going to get 2 hogs on the 6th possibly, with 2 rooks looking this way and just eat everything up. He takes the pawn finally. Now he has tactics, okay? So he wants this, but he takes the knight. So if you take back, he's going to get a fork, right? And then the king can't go here because the knight covers. So you'd end up picking up some material there, it looks like, with this pawn falling. Sorry, this pawn falling. So, for example, if you were to take here, we get the check. Yeah, you can take a6, but everything else falls. You can choose maybe b3 probably, and then f3 is going to fall. Yeah, you can just take it this way. So everything is collapsing. I'm sure there's some very good lines for black here. And once you take this one, then you have this pawn coming. So yeah, this isn't the knight's superior to the bishop here, and yeah, the position should collapse. So he just takes the knight, comes back now. So now the rook's hanging. If he had taken it, well then he's just going to be down. So sorry, if you took this way, takes here. And that's less decisive. And now there's a passed pawn. So he doesn't need that. Don't give him that. Just come back. And now the threat is still alive. And we have 2, 4, 5 pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're down a pawn temporarily, but it doesn't matter. You can't challenge the rook because the rooks are doubled on the 6. So you have to go away. And then everything just collapses. Now we even let him take it with check. Well, it didn't matter. If you go up, you're going to get checked and checked anyway. So he gives him the check. Check. Take this one. And now he resigned because he's threatening to go. You can't take the bishop because then you go here, you skewer, and you win the rook. Oh wow, and yeah, he's just breaking in, probably about to get mated. So yeah, pretty awful. So that's a good example of what you can do. Just you might, it might seem superfluous, but this is if you play this line and you look up Grandmaster games, I just did a quick search of the opening when you played Rookie 8. I said, hey, what does Black usually play there? And then I came across this game. So I'm like, oh look, it's Michael Adams and he lost. So it must be pretty useful to learn from that. Okay, so after Rookie 8, not the end of the world, but maybe Knight A6 was your improvement. So he does G4 anyway, and then in your analysis, what did you say? G4, interesting move. Wow, what is this? No one plays G4. Well, actually, the guy Adams played G4 on move 18, not 17, I guess. I immediately thought this guy does not respect me. He thinks he can play junk and still win. Well, we will see. I just need to play slow and punish this move somehow. After previous games where he played dubious moves, I asked him why. He said, I wanted to imbalance the position. After he said that, I thought someday that approach will hurt him. Oh, that's what you mentioned, right? And yeah, and it will hurt you sometimes. But that's sort of the risk that you're taking. If you're again, yeah, it does entail a risk if you're creating imbalances. But if you're an uncompromising player, it's not just that you're crazy and you want to just have fun over the chessboard and like create chaos, but you're trying to create winning chances. So I get it. I get why he wants to imbalance it with G4. Did he need to do that? No. I mean, and again, if we wanted to, now you could do the same exercise and you could click on the opening book here or use your own Explorer, but this is nice. It's open source. You can just click on it. It's free. And you see that white wins in this game. Look at that with A3. I'm actually curious. Let's look at a couple moves. So just A3, the knight retreats to A6. And I mentioned as in the game that then you might be able to get like this and anchor in that B3 square, land there as an advanced on an advanced support point. But okay, now he did B4 and he actually won that game. And notice that if you take it, you can't take on B4 due to that pin on the knight. You would win the rook. So that's what you have to do. It looks like, and this was this was a 2500 against a 2300. So clearly there was a mismatch. So it may not be the most represented or the most best example of how you can win. But hey, it's still a 2500. I'm sure it's instructive. Yeah, so maybe he should have done A3 for instead of G4. So G4 was played. It looked like, well, this guy lost, this expert, and Michael Adams lost playing G4. Now you played H5 instead of H6. So now that's what I would challenge you to consider, doing H6. Very interesting idea. Now again, I understand you're angry at this guy. You're like, what is he doing? He's trying to crush me. He told me before the game that he has my number. He's playing G4 with impunity, and like, what about just H6? I think it could still work there. Now again, it looks like, okay, you allow this, but then you just take it, and the problem is that H3 is just hanging. I mean, even if it weren't hanging, again, you'd still have more protection than your opponent would after the exchange of the G pawn for the H pawn. So it's like the bayonet is not, this bayonet attack of G5 is not decisive for white here, like it is in some lines. Maybe if white prepared more, again, if he had his rook on G1 and like was able to get on break open the G file, okay, maybe. But you could consider H6 still with the idea of securing your dark squares, similar to what happened in that game. And yeah, you might go into an endgame like he did, and it worked out. If you don't go into the endgame, well, then you might mate him on the H file or something if you get to take that way. Okay, so you do H5. Neil played H5. Knight goes back. And I think you mentioned you might try to win. What was you mentioned your idea? I spent 10 whole minutes on this move. You're at 40, so you've only spent, you're at 46, so you haven't even spent 15 minutes on a 60-minute game. That's good. After looking at lots of outcomes, I decided to go for it. I am better developed, and I think I can win his G-pawn if I can lure it far enough into my camp, and if he takes my H-pawn, I think I am better. The game just went from being pretty boring to very interesting in one move. Yeah, that's true. And the knight F-H2, this move surprised me, and then you take. I am ready to dance with this expert. About 3 minutes used to make this move, which is taking. Yeah, that's good that you spent a few minutes because it changes the structure if you decide to take. But yeah, why not? I mean, I think at some point you're going to take, unless you're just waiting for him to push or to take you here. Yeah, obviously you don't. I don't think you care about him taking because again, that now that we see that idea of the bishop, anytime that pawn moves, you take h3, which is should be beneficial for black. You kind of have to play this position fearlessly, knowing also that you do have some pretty good activity on the king side. And again, this bishop, he would like to get in the game, but he's blocked. The rook's not in the game. A lot of times in the Ruy Lopez, they stay there. But here, it's not quite working out for white. This bishop is a little active. You know, he's looking here, but it's not doing anything yet. Maybe white would like to get a rook lift at some point, but you're disturbing his plan. I think that's the whole point of h5. You're trying to disturb it and either win g4 and be up a pawn, or just tear things open and get in there, exploit the weaknesses that he's created with g4. All those weak squares in there that cannot be defended because just because the g pawn decided to move. It's a critical decision to make. So in this case, wasn't balancing with g4 a good idea? Probably not. Never underestimate your opponent. So take on g4, take on g4, knight h7. So you did the same thing he did, but the same thing he did, and also the same thing that what was the name again? It was Agdenstein. So that he played this knight h7, but with the pawn at h6 instead of having traded like that. But yeah, it's still the same idea. You get to h7, you can go to g5. You're still looking at the dark squares. Yet now you've opened up more lines. So I think this is good for you. I still like this. Let's see what he said. So knight h7. Oh, he says it's a bad move. Played after a 5-minute think. I wanted to get my knight to g5. That seems reasonable. I thought to myself, this move is either really stupid or a GM type move. Well, I mean, the GM is funny because the GM did just play that. But why is it a bad move? I guess we'll find out. Knight e3, looking at f5. Okay, well, what's your improvement though? If it's a bad move, why is it bad, and what's the improvement? That's what I'm curious about. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, I think it's reasonable, unless you have something amazing here. I mean, you could try and do the g6 idea again. I don't think that's a bad idea. g6, king g7, and stick your rook on the h file. Say, hey, I'm getting to the h file first, and what are you going to do about it? And you might be able to actually go to h4 and further harass that pawn on g4. Just try and pick that pawn off. Yeah, I kind of like g6. g5 is not a big deal at all. g5, well, now you might go there, and then you might go here, and you might just you know, hound away that pawn on g5 and win it. Not to mention, you can always go after g6. You can go to h5, and you're hitting that. A lot of options for black here. So yeah, I do kind of like g6 and king g7. It's consolidating, and it allows your rook to come to the h file. So it can't be so bad. So knight h7, knight e3. That seems reasonable. He still wants that. Knight f5 move. So after knight, let's follow the moves because he's giving more analysis now. Looking at f5, of course. Bishop d7. I don't see anything better than connecting my rooks. Okay, let's see. Bishop to d7. Again, it looks reasonable. Well, again, in terms of nothing better, I don't know. Well, he did this game again. It was a slightly different structure, but we can use that game as a model. Try to carry out some of the same maneuvers or motifs that Agdenstein did. So g6 was played with a pawn on g5 as well. But I think it's a similar idea, and I do kind of like that. You're taking away f5 from the knight. You're playing king g7. So I don't know. I might have played g6 here. It seems like a very purposeful move. Yeah, I think bishop d7 is fine though. Well, the knight comes to f5. You drop. Okay, but now you're in more of a defensive posture after going back to f8. Rook e3. I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, I thought he might try. If he can't lift this rook, then at least he'll lift his e rook. And now it's white who gets there. Yeah, I guess he would have done it no matter what. Like, even if you had done g6. But the difference is that notice with g6, you stop the knight from coming, which in turn stops the rook for now. So it doesn't give him these tempi, right, with knight f5, rook e3, rook over somewhere. So you kind of force your opponent to think a bit and say, well, what am I supposed to do here? I just have some weaknesses, and my opponent is beginning to get that lock on the dark squares again. Again, maybe not as decisive as it would have been with the pawn on h6, but I don't think it's a huge deal. But remember, the h6, because you got to go to g5, it anchored it in, and then the pawn got to take back, further anchoring these squares. So slight difference. But due to the fact that you played h5 and captured, you weakened g4 a bit. I don't think it's going to fall, but you've weakened it. It might fall in the ending. And again, you get the h file coming. So I think that's your alternative. g6. Oh, okay. Well, rook c3. Well, you didn't take the c file, so he hits your queen. He's like, well, why don't I just make a pit stop, hit the queen, and then maybe I'll come over to the king side. But still, I mean, look at White's pieces here. They are definitely. You got to prove you have something here with White. Queen goes to d8. Yeah, now we're rerouting and looking at this diagonal. And I guess you're saying, okay, so rather than me playing g6 and then stopping your knight, I had to go back with, I let your knight and I had to go bishop f8, and then I go g6 and chase your knight. Well, the knight can go to h6 now. That's the difference, see? And you can't go g5. If he went to h6, you can't go g5, obviously, because then he just comes back and you weaken yourself. Yeah. Why now? Let's figure that out. Why wouldn't he try knight h6? Maybe he didn't want to let the bishop take. I mean, I guess you could just take, but then obviously this bishop is going to be very strong on the dark squares. Maybe you can try queen h4 or something, but then you have queen d2. I don't know. I think I like that for White if you take it. Well, you don't have to take it. You could just, you obviously don't want to go here and get forked. But you could probably get away with king g7, and you kind of say, well, what's the knight going to do? You could go g5, but no, g5 just drops the pawn. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like you get much for that. The knight could come in, but could come in here, but I don't know. Let's see what Neil said here. So we have rook e3, heavy pieces coming to the party, okay? g6, after lots of preparation, I am ready to push back. Now again, okay, now you're down to 31 minutes. And now you're going to need that time, right? So I think that's reasonable. You spent about half your time. Now you're pretty deep into the middle game. Well, middle game. I mean, it's a middle game, but White hasn't developed half his pieces. Yeah, so I would have definitely considered doing that earlier, though. I'm not sure if it's best, but it's interesting. So, but here it's fine, too. So rook c3 does not really gain a tempo. I wanted to bring my queen to the king side anyway, right? So it seemed like, yeah, he made the pit stop, but it may not have been that good. Because, yeah, look at that. Once the knight moves, you can drop your queen on h4 anytime you want. Slide it in to h4. And we have, let's see, is there a comment or something? No, it just, I don't know. It said there's some notification. I don't know. I'm still kind of new to this whole thing with the streaming. So let's see. Then he says knight g3 is expected, of course. And then he gets queen h4 in. Not sure what this threatens in the short term, but the queen covers a lot of squares and will be menacing if I bring more pieces in proximity to White's king. True, true. So we're here. No, you said expected, but again, I don't think it was to take. I wouldn't take that for granted. I think knight h6 is just a reasonable move. Let's say he goes knight h6. What would you have done here? I'm curious about that. What you had prepared, and whether, if this is strong, whether that means you shouldn't have allowed the knight in first place, and maybe you should have prevented it with g6, and have that more offensive posture instead of a more defensive one. Knight h6 check. Okay, yes, I don't think I want to take it. I think I would just go king g7. But now you can do like rook h3. Maybe knight g5, something like that, because now your queen is ready to defend it. I don't think it's a huge threat, but again, I would have felt much more comfortable earlier on with my rook on h8 instead of his rook being the one coming in. Maybe he goes, oh yeah, you can't go rook h4 because of the check. Yeah, so now you're kind of making the bishop give itself up. And yeah, the knight is actually kind of feckless on h6. It's not actually doing anything. So maybe it's not a big deal. It does look a little awkward. The king is kind of in the air. It's kind of airy on g7, you know, some opening. You always have to. I feel like the bishop might come in at some point, but maybe it's a ghost. It might not be a big deal. And again, I don't think I like that bishop coming in, giving up the dark squared bishop. I mean, yeah, again, you could. So I think I mentioned this line with queen d2. Oh, you have this move, and there's no rook h3, no nothing. So you're gonna win. You're gonna win this next move. Make him give it up for the pawn. Hey, thanks to your knight h7, it turned out to not be so bad on h7 after all. Well, in that case, you would just have to retreat if he sees it. Let's say you go, I don't know, here. So maybe we still keep this option open. I don't know. I still do like that bishop. I think that bishop, there's something to be said for it. And even though you said the queen is menacing, but you know, in the long term she might be good. But since you didn't take the h file with your rook, the king could come up and allow the rook to come here and counter, and then your queen move might be a waste. Yeah, so I don't know why he didn't do knight h6, and I'm not sure. Well, I don't know why he didn't mention it because it does seem like a reasonable try. Obviously, you're not going to play king h8, but you know, it just seems like it's better there than on g3 because now he's kind of made a concession. You're killing his initiative essentially, and now you get in. Okay, fine, and you're allowing the knight to come. Oh, well, you know, you can't come here. If you come here, you're just going to take. So yeah, again, the weakness. So it's actually a very concrete move. You may not be playing for mate. I mean, hey, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if you do eventually, after like a few moves, if you do generate some pressure on the h file and mate him, okay, you can take that. The knights will probably do this or something. But I played a lot of dragons, so I'm very used to like having the h file under attack. But here, there's no bishop, so the absence of a bishop is actually going to hurt you. If you ever have a bishop on g2, you can open things up. You can allow a queen check, whatever. You just move your king over. It's usually not a big deal, unless they have like some combined threat on the f file combined with the h file. But yeah, here it's really about the g pawn and making white regret doing that. So let's see if he regrets it. It looks like he does. Finally, he gets his bishop in the game. Well, there you go. He wants this. And then tucks it back here. At least stick it on f1, kind of like you have yours on f8. Okay. So knight here. So you get rid of it. Now, it's interesting because you think, hey, it's a bad bishop, and maybe the knight will be good, like in the game, if the knight goes to a6 and c5. But you realize the utility of the bishop as a defensive piece. I remember someone said to me once after our game, he said that even though my bishop was kind of bad, I think I ended up trading it off actually, but he said that bishop it kind of holds things together in White's position. As I mentioned, a lot of times in the Ruy Lopez, it'll be on it'll be on b1, but it has that influence, and who knows, maybe it'll get out somehow. I mean, you've locked it up, but it does have influence sometimes. Things might open up, you never know. Not here, but if things ever open up and you get e5, I'm just saying theoretically it has potential, and most importantly here, I think he's going to want it for defense. Maybe even bishop e2 just to hold g4. So knight takes, rook takes, knight f6. Yeah, you just say, give me that. And you can't go f3 because this is loose. Is like white is a little behind. Again, like this whole maneuver didn't really help him. So maybe g6 benefited you after all, playing it afterwards. Again, he should have gone knight h6, I think. But let me know what the computer analysis is on that. It gets very tricky. But yeah, he kind of wants to have this knight defended already so that he can play f3 or something. But then the h file is still problematic, not to mention the dark squares. And we can trade off that bishop anytime we want. So, okay, so he doesn't let you, but now he blocks his own bishop. This guy's not getting in the game anytime soon, but you know, later on in an end game, he can still get out. He can anchor on d4 or something. So you throw in this move, interesting, a little in-between move there before moving your knight. Do you need it? Well, if you had gone here, then white has, no, what am I thinking? See, I told you I'm a little brain dead right now. Okay, well, yeah, I guess the alternative would be knight h7. Let's see what we missed in his analysis. Well, it says bishop g4. Here I saw a ghost. But before this, you said bishop d3. This move shocked me. I get that he wants to bring his bishop to e2 or f1, but I expect him to first kick out my knight with a3. Well, you know, I thought it seems like he doesn't care about his bishop, let you take it. But my rule of thumb in the Spanish is that if I trade my wayward knight for the Spanish bishop, I am doing well. Right. It's kind of like in the dragon. In the dragon, if you can get rid of that dragon bishop on g7, it's good. If black can get rid of white's e3 bishop, it's good. It's sort of rules of thumb in certain openings with those bishops. So knight takes d3, played pretty quickly. I mean, I don't think it's an automatic move to take it. But yeah, given that you see that it's a defensive resource, you say, let me just remove the defensive resource. That's your attack. Is not necessarily bringing in more attackers here, but to remove defenders, and you'll have your fair share of attackers with your queen, your knight, your bishop, maybe a rook later on. Okay, so you take. Now, in terms of bishop g4, you said here I saw a ghost, right? I was worried that if knight takes e4, he might trap my queen or win my knight. Oh yeah, it looks like you can do it because you have the lateral pressure the second you play g5. So you see, it's like, remember when the first time you played g5 in that first line, he would have weakened h3, and in this line he weakens e4. So that these g-pawn moves are just really hurting white in this position. I mean, sometimes they'll be good. Again, to go back to a Sicilian, a lot of times you can crush your opponent with g4, g5. But here it's backfiring on him, showing that pawn moves can become weaknesses as well. But yeah, it looks like you can just take on e4. So what was the ghost you thought you saw there? And you were before that you were at 27 minutes. I was worried that he might trap my queen or my knight if he took on e4. I spent 8 minutes on this move, too much time, and played bishop g4 instead. Now we talked about long think, wrong think. Okay, that might be an example of that. Sometimes I was discussing this with Neil. Sometimes I think it could lead to good moves and inspirations. The key is to really deeply understand the position, but then you want to make the position that the board calls for, and if the board calls for this, then we want to play it. But where's the trap? Where's the threat that you take? You're immediately threatening to take his knight, not to mention take this. So what is the problem that he might trap my, I think you said knight or queen. Well, oh, you might be worried about, okay, I see that. You might be worried about this. You just go here. Yeah, there's nothing because you're actually sort of pinning it. I mean, you don't want to move the knight. You just trade queens and you're up a pawn. How would he trap? What would happen to the knight? Yeah, I understand it's under attack once, but white only has one move here, and then things are going to be settled pretty quickly in terms of the tension on that knight on e4, and he has to resolve that tension because you're threatening to just pick up a pawn. So yeah, you can be pretty concrete here. Knight takes e4. There's no tricks. Fortunately, you don't have that. No blunders here. Knight takes. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. So this is the moment where if that's the obvious move. Look, if this were a blitz game, would you take the pawn? If you saw, okay, at first maybe we didn't notice it. I didn't notice it, but if he's, because I was focusing more on this, but hey, if he hangs a pawn in a blitz game, you see it, you'll probably do it. So my rule of thumb is, make the blitz move unless you can prove you have something better. So if if you're going to do something else, and if you haven't proven it's better than the blitz move of just taking that pawn, that's an important pawn. Then yeah, maybe you should think longer then because it's not a blitz game. But the blitz move isn't the obvious move. That should be your default. You want to make the obvious move because most of the time that your intuition is correct. If you think you should do it, that you can do it, try to make it work. Okay, so then you said, okay, we'll get to that after we look at a few more moves now. So bishop g4. That was the ghost based on it. Now, yeah, it's also not really a concrete move either because the queen could just move and then like the knight, what's he doing? Now, of course, he secures e4. So, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess, well, if your justification was, I don't want the e pawn, I want the g pawn instead, I don't think that's unreasonable. Because if you could win the g pawn, well, then you might win the e pawn later, or you might just mate him somehow. You might get on the white squares or something. So yeah, getting rid of the g pawn is certainly not a bad idea. Can you get it? Because you've stopped knight f3 now. You can always chop the knight and take on g5. So he takes, you take. Well, he goes there. You can attack with your bishop though, right? Yeah. So you're just going for g5. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Does he have anything? I don't see any way to stop that. Because again, this position is just so locked up. If you have weaknesses in a locked up position, they might just fall like ripe apples eventually. So queen goes to b6. So he's like, all right, just take my pawn and I'm going to do something else. Well, we probably don't want to give him d6, but we might have to drop like one of these pawns. We'll drop b5, it looks like. Um, yeah, it should be fine. I'll take g5. No, you didn't want to give it to him. So I guess you're thinking, well, yeah, you're thinking actually you can have everything here. You say, I'm going to just defend this, everything's solid, and then I'm going to win this next. Because now I have 3 on it. You can't even get more than 2 defenders on it. Do we get it? Okay, then that gives him time for a3. Do we ever take it? Yeah, you end up taking on g5. I don't know. I may have just taken it. Let's say you go knight takes or bishop takes. What about knight takes? Again, now we might be the ones that have the nice bishop patrolling all those dark squares. So I don't know if he wants to take it. Now, if you take here, if he does take it, it's good for you. If he takes here, then now you could take a second pawn. And now do we have to worry about anything here? I don't think so, because if we need to, we can even play f5. Okay, yeah, oh, it's pinned also. So f5 just secures it. Yeah, that should be fine. And again, I'm not using computer analysis. This is just about, I may be missing some stuff, but this is just about like the main ideas, how I would approach it, if that's helpful. So queen e3, bishop e7, queen b6. I view this as a desperation move. I mean, it's an attempt at counterplay, but he knows his king side is sort of collapsing here. So yeah, I don't think your judgment was totally off in terms of not taking on e4. It's like, yeah, you had it. It was fine. The difference is that actually getting e4 would have been, you would have still saddled him with this weakness on g5, and that's stopping his bishop. So you don't really need to resolve that there. You just leave it there. I think, yeah, if I were going to leave one pawn, I would actually maybe rather leave it, because this pawn doesn't protect his king anyway. But whereas this pawn helps you get into his position deeper, and it also weakens d5. So yeah, I would rather take the e-pawn, sure. But I don't think it's a big deal. Okay, now he gets a little counterplay. So you just take it. Go here, kick him out. And rook. Oh, okay. So you end up trading bishops, but you break in. Oh, this gets interesting. So you've given him some counterplay for sure, though, but you're getting in. I mean, it's got to be dangerous. Let's see what you say now. Queen b6, not surprising. I think he knows he is worse and is trying to distract/scare me. Again, I view it as sort of desperation, but it's probably his best chance because he's worse and he needs counterplay. I see this move for what it is, pure desperation. Okay, we use the same word on that. The question is, do I let him take my b pawn and continue my attack, or do I calmly protect my b pawn first? Yeah, okay, I was thinking along the same lines. I probably would have just let him take the b pawn, honestly, because you're going to get 2 pawns, it looks like. Either you get 2 pawns or you get those dark squares if he gives up his bishop for the night. And you just get more initiative that way. Whereas here, okay, now things are a little messy. He's got 2 rooks on the 3rd now, so maybe he gets the chance. Well, he's still pinned up, so he can't, he can't really get anywhere with the rooks as long as he's pinned. But who knows, maybe at some point he'll move his king and he'll get some activity on the f file or the h file. He can do the f file right away if he wanted to. But he still needs to worry about e4. So you go here. So you allow that, okay, this was an interesting decision. So you allow him to take this. Well, you basically trade off your technically bad bishop for his good bishop, and that collapses next. Yeah, everything might collapse, actually. I was worried about d6, but let's see. I mean, more importantly, you're getting in his back rank. I mean, you have like a near mate now. So, yeah, I mean, now we can start thinking about checks. He goes here. Wait. Do you have him? Did you miss a mate? Am I seeing things? Wait, isn't that a mate? Check. Here. Oh, never mind. Yeah, I am seeing things. There's no mate because the knight. There still might be some dangers, but yeah, that's why you bring your knight to g5. Yeah, it looks that check looks dangerous. But now we actually can do this, and rather than checking with the queen, we could even bring the second rook in, and then let the queen operate. Maybe can operate on the diagonal after taking on e4 or something and trading. And the rook will operate on the queen might come back to the h file too. But yeah, it looks like you have like a near mate here. Let's see. So I think it's good for you. Okay, now you say, okay, you mentioned his A3 was looking for queenside counterplay, taking care of both sides of the board. And actually, that's interesting because we were talking about that in the previous game where you were just focusing on the king side. So now you are applying that, and you're okay. So I can't fault you for that. Not just because I mentioned it, but I mean, I think it's a good idea to not just become fixated on one side of the board. It is something moving towards mastery. I think that is something that masters will do a lot. Kind of you don't hey, if it works, it works. If you just ramp it on the king side, but controlling the entire board at the same time is a good thing. I'm staying calm as I feel that I am better. But you're down to 13 minutes now. Okay, so yeah, I mean there was a lot of complications. So understandably, I would probably, as I mentioned, I get into time pressure. I would probably be down to 5 minutes at this point and then mess it up or something. But no, hopefully, I would like the 30-second increment here. So, but in a short game like this, you only get your 5 seconds. Um, so connecting my rooks on the third. Oh, he's connecting his rooks on the third to protect the king with rook takes a3. But the first rank just got very weak. Yeah, as Yasser once says, Yaz, my spidey sense are tingling. I think rook takes a3 is a big mistake, and I want to punish it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just feel like it's close to mate. You have a mating attack basically, and like almost like it looked like you almost had a mate, but the knight was just hanging on by a thread. Um, if we can get rid of the knight or somehow get to here, um, it's close. There's something here, but those rooks are like stopping knight f3, so we're not there yet. But maybe we even can come. No, we are. Now we're threatening mate on h3, and if there's not a mate there, we might have this, and then coming here. There's so many ideas, but yeah, queen h3 is a mate. So what does he do? Knight e2. Oh, tricky, man. He's really hanging on by a thread. So he's hitting your rook. He's protecting g1, so this is not going to be a mate. You could check him this way now and try to come here. And the difference is that now that your knight covers here, oops. Now that your knight covers, we don't want that. Now that the knight covers h3, so if you check, rook blocks, we can just pick up a rook, and then we can pick up f2 and pick up the knight or something. Yeah, that's looking pretty bad. And you still have a rook on a1, so you stop all the checks. So it's very important that you've retained your king safety. That's interesting though. So like you're the fact that you played on both sides of the board, you were like, yeah, I can calmly deal with that. And then he didn't want to give in to that, so he's like, no, I gotta get my rooks in. I have to get something here. But that just hurt him more, and then you're the one who ended up getting the play. So I think your idea of allowing him to take on e7, not just because it was a bad bishop, but because it allowed your rook to infiltrate, was really nice for you here. And yeah, it's got to be like +5 or something, +3. I just feel like there's got to be a win in sight here within a few moves. Okay, so knight e2. Okay, you take it. Well, you end up trading queens, and you can pick up this pawn. What about this move? That's definitely tempting. Check. All you need is a move that's good enough here, because especially if you're short on time, you just need the good enough move. But what about check? Oh, the problem is that when he blocks, you can't take here yet because the queen's hanging. But you can take f2 and then take h3. So let's say you check, he blocks. Wait, and now that's a mate. Okay, I don't think I'm seeing things there. And if you check this way and he goes here, we have check. Now we can make h1 work. Okay, now things are working. Well, he goes here. Oh man. Well, I mean, this is like a mating attack. You take this with check. That's not looking good. So you probably mentioned something about that move. Yeah, there must. I'm thinking the same thing. There must be mate. Okay. So queen c7, desperate and losing. Thank you, Mr. Expert. Rook c8. What are you going to do when my knight takes on g5? Queen takes bishop. Yep, thank you. Rook takes bishop on c1. This tempo is critical. Perhaps you did not see how powerful my queen and knight combo will be. Well, I think it sort of was born of his desperation, and somehow his head was cloudy. I mean, if he says something weird like that at the beginning of the game, his head was probably already a little cloudy. Okay, I'm not trying to diss the guy, but he dissed you, so I think it's fair game. But yeah, somewhere he just lost his objectivity. Okay, so you take on e2, but what did you say about that? So we have 92, and I knew it here. I said to myself, there must be a mate. I don't see it. It is almost 10 p.m. Most games are over and people are walking around. Yeah, this guy, I think your queen check was probably winning. A few people are watching my board. I did not get much sleep last night. I worked a 9-hour day. Now I'm exhausted, and my clock is ticking. I see that I can just trade knights and win the important f2 pawn. I think, yeah, like I said, maybe it's good enough. This has to be winning. I'm up 2 pawns with a continuing attack on the king. Also, I saw that king g7 and rook h1 looks pretty devastating if I have time to play it. That idea finally. King g7, rook h8, I guess you meant. I have this in my back pocket. Focus, try to make a mate. Tick, tick, tick. So describing the cognition a bit, which is good. Down to about 6 minutes. I have to move. So queen take a bad move. I said to myself, I'm 90% sure I missed a mate, but I don't see it. And I refuse to lose on time. I'm still better and I have the initiative and more material. So you didn't say like what it was, but okay, I guess we'll leave that to me here. But I'm sure you, now after looking, I'm sure you saw it if there was a mate. Well, okay, I think, so again, after check, now, we can't take with the knight because the queen hangs here. So we take this way, this hangs, but we have this now. Yeah, that's a mate. We don't need to take the knight. So he can't do that. He has to go here, which I think, I mean, you can even do that, but I think this is going to be the most devastating. Oh, we don't have rook g1 though, but we have, because the knight would take. I don't think we want that. Oh, wait, now we have queen h3. See, that's the mate. Yeah, that's your mate right there. So, and now wait, what was the time on your clock? I think if you had like 3 minutes, you should take a minute if you think you have a mate. You should try to find it if you have 3 minutes. What was the time? I don't think you have. Oh, 6 minutes. No, I would have. I mean, look, if you think you're winning and you don't want to get lower on the clock, it's a tough judgment call. But it's like, but see, once you start looking at the variations and you're like, okay, I know I can check. Well, maybe if you missed something with a check, or you thought that he could block. But no, you can't even. I mean, I think you would have seen this. So after a check, you look at it for a few seconds, and you see he goes king g2, and then you see queen h1 check. You're like, all right, I got to go down this line, and then try to make this work. Who cares about the f2 pawn, right? It's a king hunt. King g3, and then that's really elegant because now when he goes to g3, he blocks the rook. So then you come back. So you have instead of there, yeah, check. So if rook f2 is forced mate, not just winning something, it's mate. Here we have a check and mate. That's really nice. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, so that would have been the end right there. So again, it's questions of when to use time and when not. If you think you have a mate, I think you can spend a minute at least. Because I think given your tactical acumen, I think if you spent a minute, you would have found it. And then worst comes to worst, you'd have a mate. Okay, you still have like 4 or 5 minutes. But you get f2. So you go, oh, you don't go for the endgame though. Okay, he's pinned. You're up 2, 4, 5. You're up 2 pawns. Yeah, it's a winning position. And but again, it could have been mate, but it's okay. You can just torture him now in the endgame. Well, he has hope. He still has a little bit of hope, but no, I think that hope is quickly going away. Yeah. He has that. That's annoying. Do we have queen g5? Oh, you have that move. Nice, nice. Yep, that's it. You win the queen. Nice operating through the X-ray of this rook. So when he takes, you just take it. We're protecting it. And we will, do we have a mate still? Do we have a mate if we take with the queen or something? No, I don't think so. Let's just, we win the entire queen actually. Yeah, let's just win the queen, then we can mate like in 2 moves or something. Yeah, that was nice. Let's see, any final comments? So, queen g2, after this move, I immediately thought of the great book, Fundamental Checkmates. I'd studied something that felt like this position. Queen f4 check, good move. See, okay, you found that move in 15 seconds. I guess you're saying, like, if you don't see the mate or something right away, you're not going to do it. He goes rook g3. My opponent was moving quickly, even though he had about 10 minutes left on his clock. Yeah, so, well, I think neither of you should have been moving super fast here, because these are critical positions. King g2, I play this move with a smile on my face. It felt great to have the time to play this move. 5:21 on my clock. Yeah, I think you mean King g7, right? Where is it? So what did you play? So you finally got it, yeah. So there was the idea that I was talking about earlier. So it ended up being like your knockout punch. How great is it to make a move like King G7 as a knockout, right? It's kind of like if you can make a king move with a check. Well, this is a king move to prepare a check and to prepare almost a mate and win, or at least winning a queen, because the king is smothered basically, and you got to block. That doesn't look good. So he goes queen e2, and then what else did you say? Um, Now we did rook h3. Force took a minute to find. Um, Double check and play the next move. Rook h2. Yep, the X-ray tactic. And I know, again, studying those positions, that'll help you there in positions like this. These are like, that'll help you with the 1-2 movers, right? I think it was Botvinnik who said, most of the time, masters even, they're just calculating like 2 moves ahead. Most positions. It's more like you might be looking in depth in terms of the ideas, but in terms of concrete calculation, usually you're moving like at 2 movers. I move, my opponent moves. I move, my opponent moves. Maybe then, of course, well, at certain positions, you're making huge branches, of course, huge trees with a bunch of branches. But yeah, but when it comes to like a forced mating sequence, I would take the time and try to calculate it out for sure. Um, at this point, my opponent looked at me, looked at the clock, looked back at me, and said, "I resign." And I said, "Good game," and held out my hand. We shook. Okay, at least he shook. At least he's, and so he is at least something of a gentleman after all. We shook, and he quickly left the playing hall. I was elated. Nice job. Yeah, definitely is an interesting game. Um, yeah, that was nice. That was really nice. I think the first one you ended up slipping out or something after you had, not played your best game. But this one, you outplayed the guy. And okay, you maybe didn't use the idea of the guy who beat Michael Adams, but look up that game. It's Adams Agdenstein 1991. It doesn't say. I don't think it has the game date in terms of where it was, but just Google that game. It'll probably show up on chessgames.com or something. Because yeah, that was really beautiful. The ideas that he used with the H6 idea and maneuvering the knight. I guess he was very familiar with that, and he had seen h6. But your h5 seemed to work also. But the one thing that really popped out to me was allowing the knight f5 maneuver and just like denying your opponent. I don't know if I think I overlooked a couple things, so maybe I overlooked something there. But um, after 93, I don't know. My intuition tells me just play g6. Let's quickly just look up and see what the computer thinks. Okay, the computer actually agrees with me. For a second, it did. It was liking g6. It says you're about half a point up. Okay, now it's going back to g6, thinking you're like a pawn up in value. So again, I don't want to use the computer too much because it's just about the ideas. But yeah, so to confirm the idea anyway, with its line, the key is you use the computer, but you have to verify it based on the lines it gives you. It's just to throw out some sample lines and say, I didn't consider that. So it's saying g6, knight f3, king g7, and then and then the knight a6 idea, and then doesn't want knight c5. Well, here's what it says: g6, knight f3, and then you get your bishop d7. Or I think it liked king g7 also. Okay, bishop. Let's first get that out, and then both kings come up. That seems pretty wise. Because they can let the rook swing behind and protect bishop e2, and then you get your rook here. Yeah, I think that's really, I think that the computer confirms that looks pretty good. The rook can go there too, and then you bring your knight here, and you're still hitting this. You're putting pressure on all these pawns. Queen c1, let's say, and it likes the ending for you. Well, then you're winning the g4 pawn after queen c1. What if he does something else? Like, what's his standard move? Well, let's just look at something random. Let's say it goes, well, you're attacking g4. So there's really, okay, let's say like in the game, this can't be good, but let's say like in the game, yeah, the knight's coming to f4, of course. Beautiful. So this still could have totally worked out for you. Again, you have the added benefit. Well, given that you played h5, you get your rook on the h file. In the other game, the guy played h6 and took on g5. Well, that gave him control of the dark squares a little more in addition to the h-file prospects. A little different because the pawn was on h3, so it's actually more of a target. Now the rooks become they can contest the h-file. So it's a little different. But maybe try h6 next time, see if it works, if they do something like g4. And then after, I don't know, sample line, let's say they do knight f1, And now you get your bishop g4, and okay, that's just great. Yeah, really nice position. And you can still do your queen d8 stuff if you want to make sure you win this pawn. And you got the pin on the knight, and yeah, you're just dominating the position, and you're infiltrating on the weakened squares. So I think, yeah, I think it confirms that you could have tried g6 there. I'm not sure why you didn't. And when he went knight f5, now when you played g6, why didn't he? Let's just see why it didn't go knight h6. It's saying that white is still pretty good here, plus 0.7, about half a pawn up or so. It's saying it can attack your, well, actually, it's giving it's saying rook c3 or a3. Well, okay, what if there's check? Let's just see the check. Is it so bad? Oh, it actually likes giving. Well, I mean, the bishop was bad. Yeah, the bishop was bad. But I just felt like, oh, what am I doing? It would be no, you need rook because it's not defended. That's why you need rook c3. But I thought that was probably his idea. So you go queen d8, and now look at that. You can maybe even think about sacking the knight and opening up a line. But let's just say, I'm just curious about this check. How bad is it? Bishop takes, bishop takes. Yeah, you got rid of your bad bishop. I think, and again, after queen h4, we are threatening g5 to trap the bishop. So he has to draw back. Yeah, we looked at this line, I think. Bishop d2, and then the knight goes in. So actually, it turns out, yeah, you've given up your knight, your bishop for knight, but your bishop is or your knight is superior to the bishop on d2, and it's kind of part of a mating attack. And is it saying king g7 at some point? I think at some point you still might want that move in rook h8. And yeah, I'm liking your position. So hopefully that was helpful, the analysis. Yeah, we got some pretty interesting lines there. And I think really what it came down to was that somehow this structure just didn't work out for white. Let's go to the actual position. Like in the game where this bishop just never got in the game really, and once he did, it got taken because he was trying to shore up his weaknesses. Yes, that didn't work out. The queen side stuff didn't work out for white. The king side stuff didn't work out for white, and you exploited him nicely. So job well done. You punished your opponent who was not, necessarily being the best sport, so he probably deserved it. And good work.